This is one of my favorite topics to talk about the whole idea of brain science and yoga and what we can do to utilize some aspects of brain science to really help us further along the path in our pursuit of peace and happiness. So I would like to start out by sharing with you a story, and which some of you have heard this story before. So if you have, please bear with me, but it really does sort of tie in to what I want to share with you this evening. So many years ago, a dear friend of mine's sister moved out to LA, and she was a huge fan of Paul Newman. And therefore, she was thinking in the back of her mind that she might possibly run into him someday. And she was out there for about 3 or 4 years. And lo and behold, one day she got lucky, and she was in this ice cream shop, and there was Paul Newman sitting in the corner having some ice cream. And she was with her 3 children, and she just was beside herself, just so excited and kind of creating a little bit of a scene in her excitement and trying to figure out if she should go over and get his autograph or if she should not, and, just kind of creating this whole scene in her excitement. And she was starting to get a little bit embarrassed, and so she decided, I can't, just forget it. I can't do it. I'm not going to go over there and get his autograph. So she gathered up her children, and in her distraction, she walks outside, and she realizes she didn't have her ice cream cone. And she's like, oh my God, I left my ice cream cone at the counter. She's like, I cannot go back in there and get this ice cream cone. So finally she's like, all right, I just have to go back in. She slinks back in, walks up to the counter, and says to the guy at the counter, she says, do you have my ice cream cone? And he said, no, ma'am, I'm sorry, I gave you 4 ice cream cones. She's like, well, where's my ice cream cone? He's like, I can't help you. I don't know where your ice cream cone is. And she's kind of creating a little bit of a scene with her, excitement and stuff. And all of a sudden, there's a tap on her shoulder. And she turns around, and it's Paul Newman. And she just about died. And he had this little twinkle in his eye, and he said, are you looking for your ice cream cone? And she stammered, and she's like, yes. And he said, it's in your purse. Imagine the embarrassment. And yes, she did get his autograph. And the reason I like this story is because it really is a metaphor for yoga, in the sense that we get very distracted in our lives, and we're looking all over the place for our peace and our happiness, and yet our dessert is right there within us the whole time. Just like Gurdev was talking tonight, it's already there, and we just have to be still enough to receive it and hear it and listen to it. So I'm going to talk to you tonight about how can we utilize some tools and techniques related both to yoga and to brain science to find that dessert within us. So the questions that we ask ourselves, that we should ask ourselves, is how do we break the chain of negative thinking, bad moods, depression, anxiety, fear, stagnation, and so on? There's an endless list of things that we struggle with as human beings. We have a spaghetti mind. There's, we admit it. We do. Our minds are like spaghetti, and we zig and we zag through life. And sometimes we land and we find that little sense of sacredness or that sense of peace. And certainly we have to cultivate it. So sometimes it does take a while. But in the meantime, our spaghetti minds are causing a lot of trouble for us. We get stuck in this negative looping of wanting to control things, wanting to have things our way, exhibiting narcissistic tendencies, whatever gyrations of the mind, we seem to loop through it in a continuous way, and we can't quite figure out how do we break this darn cycle of negative thinking or bad habits. What do we do? It's like we try to willpower ourselves through sometimes, but that doesn't really work. That's difficult and that's challenging. So there are solutions to our dilemmas. And one is an understanding of our neurobiology and how it correlates and interfaces with the principles of yoga and mindfulness. So we have to start with this premise. And I think this personally is one of my absolute favorite quotes by Carl Jung. What if I should discover that the poorest of the beggars and the most imprudent of all offenders are all within me, that I stand in need of the alms of my own kindness, that I myself am the enemy who must be loved? What then? That is such a powerful statement and question to ourselves. What if I should discover that I myself am the enemy who must be loved? What then? What are you going to do off of that? What then? We have to figure out what the what then is. If you yourself are the enemy who must be loved, what then? Where is our job then in terms of our spiritual practices? So the takeaway point number 1 for you this evening is healing starts you to you. And learning to have loving kindness towards ourselves is so important in terms of dismantling negative core beliefs and bad habits. It's got to start with some kind of infusion that you recognize that there are pieces of all of us that are negative looping, that the amygdala is flaring, that the prefrontal cortex, who's sort of like the decision maker, has gone offline, who's not activating as much as we would like it to. So start talking to your brain and say, hey, you got to come back online. Hey, amygdala, knock it off. You got to stop flaring. I know it sounds silly, but it actually works. So it's just that cognitive revamping. It's just the rewiring that we need to do. When we rewire like that, we literally lay down new neural pathways in our brain. We know now that the brain has plasticity. The last 25 years has been an explosion in the field of affective neuropsychology and affective neuroscience and just neuroscience in general, where we can see into the brain because of the advent of new technologies like fMRIs and qEEGs and so on. We know now that the brain has plasticity, that throughout our life till the day we die, we can lay down new neural pathways in the brain. And that's really, really exciting stuff. So yoga provides us with a model of the mind. And this is something that for any yoga practitioner, we really should pause, think about, and embrace this concept and these ideas. There's 4 aspects of what yoga says constitutes the mind. The manas, the everyday thinking, the ahamkara, self-identity, chitta, unconscious mind, and the buddhi, which is the silent mental witness, although we have to wake it up. All right, so what does that look like? Here are the 4 functions. Manas, sensory processing mind. We do this all day long. We're always processing. There's just all sorts of things constantly going in, going out. The chitta, unconscious mind, the memory bank. Now, the chitta is also the hippocampus, if you're looking at it from a neuroscience point of view. And from that particular angle, yes, we have memory formations in the hippocampus that are of trauma or of pain. But as we begin to gently develop the buddhi, the part that knows, the silent witness, the one that decides, judges, and discriminates, we can begin to allow those memories to bubble up to the surface and deactivate our emotional attachment to them. It's not like they're going to go away. They don't have to go away. It's the ahamkara, the I maker, the ego, the identification that says this is a problem. And yes, it may be a problem, or it had been a problem in the past, because we don't want to demean that or marginalize that. But what we do need to do is that enemy within has to be healed. And it's done through loving kindness toward ourselves, toward that pain point, toward that wounded child inside of us who finally needs somebody, something, some energy to begin to comfort and nurture that pain point. And that's why Carl Jung's quote is so powerful, because it's you to you. No one else can do that for you. It's almost like it's a, how do you say that? It's like an endless, how do you say that? Like a deep well that you keep pouring things in of love from an external source, and it never is good enough. No matter how much love people give you, for some situations, it's never good enough. And it's almost like it doesn't really hit what needs to be comforted inside of us. And so we have to start to take responsibility for that process, put on those pause buttons, and begin to really sit with our wounded spaces and places inside of us and love it into wellness. Oh, wait, let's go back. So the Amrita Buddhi Upanishad says, and this is, I think, so powerful and so interesting quote, mind is the problem, mind is the solution. So we have to use the mind to do our healing. So we have to observe each of those 4 functions of the mind. What is going on right now in your mind? Just like a pause moment. Like what is the ahamkara saying? Is it judging? Is it criticizing? Is it making you process internally? Like this is what mindfulness and yoga are all about. It's having one eye open and one eye closed, and that part of us connected in, listening in, watching, observing, and healing, and activating healing energy. We have to train each of the 4 functions of the mind. In order to heal, one must observe, accept, and understand the 4 functions. The practice of yoga entails training these 4 functions of the mind and becoming more and more aware of them. So takeaway point number 2, understand these 4 aspects. If you really want to heal and you really want to shift away from negative thinking and judgmental thinking and shame and guilt and control and all sorts of other emotional and psychological issues, we really do have to train these 4 aspects of the mind. We have to learn to cultivate things. Healing doesn't just happen just because we have an intention to make it happen. It happens because we have an intention to make healing happen. So, negative thinking and bad habits. Negative patterns and defensiveness, it's complicated. It is very complicated. I'm not up here to tell you that this is simple and easy, although there are some easeful solutions. We have these defensive patterns for a purpose in certain situations. They're used to keep us safe from threat or vulnerability. Others are learned behaviors or learned helplessness, or others to maintain control, and so on. But we can't just slam into emotional vulnerability after we've been traumatized or abused or emotionally marginalized. We have to learn and understand what the defense patterns are, why those negative patterns are there, because they keep people at a distance. They keep people away from hurting us again and again and again. So it's not like it doesn't serve some purpose, but we have to start to deactivate that because it's not bringing us what is true peace in a very authentic way of integrity within the system. Bad habits, things we want or desire, bad habits such as sugar, alcohol, drugs, cigarettes. Thinking of these produces dopamine in the brain. And dopamine is a happy chemical in the brain. So we get pulled toward those habits. So there's some reward factor there. So that's why it can be hard to break a bad habit. So raise your hand if you like chocolate. Everybody raise your hand who likes chocolate. Okay, great. Now, guess what we're having for prasad this evening? We're having chocolate for prasad this evening. What do you think about that? Is that a good thing? Okay, you just released a little burst of dopamine in anticipation that you're going to have chocolate for prasad. And the truth is, I told you a little white lie because I don't know what we're having for prasad. But I wanted to just share with you that probably most every single one of you that likes chocolate had this little go off. That is dopamine that goes off in the brain. It's the anticipatory happy chemical about things that we might get that we want. Okay? And again, that's why it's hard to break those bad habits because that dopamine is going off and it's telling us this is a good thing when in fact it's not a good thing. So case study, I'm going to share with you a little bit of a case study. This is one of my clients that I worked with years and years ago. He was a 24-year-old young man, medical student, articulate, driven, socially engaged, high-functioning individual. And his presenting problem was substance abuse, alcohol abuse, high anxiety, fatigue, moderate depression, and feelings of being disconnected in the world. Okay? So what we're looking at is the concept and idea that I want to share with you that emotions the psyche and emotions are layered. It's never simple. It's never just black and white, guaranteed. It's always layered. So his presenting problem is alcohol, but alcohol is not really the problem. It's a symptom and it's a secondary problem. It's an individual who's attempting to cover up and self-medicate his pain and his feelings of fatigue or anxiety or whatever else is going on with him. So yes, we have to perhaps deal with the issue of alcohol, but we have to take it down more layers than that type of intervention. So here's what it might look like. Underneath the alcoholism could be depression. He's just not feeling that he's performing at a level that the rest of his peers are performing at. And so he's just feeling that layer of depression. But what is depression? Most of the time, depression is suppressed anger, unless it's related to grieving. It is related to suppressed anger. So then you have to go to the layer below depression. And what you find there, of course, is anger. What does anger do? What is the function and defensiveness around the whole concept of anger? It covers up fear, vulnerability, and anxiety. It's a protective mechanism so that the individual doesn't feel exposed and vulnerable. So then you have to question and ask yourself, what's underneath the anger? Why is the anger there? What's making it manifest? Typically, what's under that is fear or anxiety. And anxiety can be very, very sneaky thing, because a lot of times people have anxiety and it's driving our behavior, but we don't even know that we have it. It just is very difficult to pin it down, especially generalized anxiety. And fear and anxiety can be the outcome of shame and guilt. So then you go to the level below in the psyche and you take a look at, is there shame down there? Is there guilt down there around some event or traumatizing situation that happened that was out of your control? So if yes, then of course, the bottom line is we feel out of control. We don't feel safe. We feel a constant sort of cycling of threat, emotional threat in our interactions and within ourselves. But the most important thing is underneath all of this is a core belief. And that is what has to be gotten to and healed. Because if you don't heal that core belief, it's going to continue to activate in all aspects of your life. It's going to drive your behavior. And so examples of core beliefs are, I'm not smart enough, I'm inferior, I'm not attractive, no one likes me, I'm not lovable, I have to be perfect, I have to be a people pleaser. The list is endless of what our core beliefs are really all about. But these, like I said, these can be hard to access, and it's hard sometimes to admit that, gosh, I feel that I'm not smart enough. I feel that I'm not equal to my peers. I feel that I'm not whatever, fill in the blank, you see? But those are crystallized places in our psyche, again, that will drive our behaviors. They can affect our self-esteem and our self-worth. And for healing really to happen, you've got to get to that place that has crystallized and that those memory banks are in the hippocampus area of the brain. So takeaway point number 3, gently start to investigate your layering, slowly start to discern your core beliefs. And if needed, gather your support team and seek professional help to assist you in healing and figuring out what these negative core beliefs are what they really are, and how to, it's kind of like you're doing an archaeological dig inside your psyche. And you have to figure out, what do I really believe about myself? And then dismantle that, because it's probably not true. And I want to just also share with you, just because you think a thought, it does not mean that that thought is true. Please, if there's nothing else you take with you tonight, take that concept, because we think these thoughts. We think, oh my God, I did a terrible job. Well, it doesn't mean that that is a true thought. You see what I'm getting at? We have to question our thoughts and discard them, because they will wrap you around and take you for rides that you don't want to go on. So mindfulness is, in short, the practice of being aware of what's happening, what you are feeling, thinking, and assessing internally and externally in the present moment. It's being here and now without judgment. How refreshing is that? It gives our poor psyches and those places that activate around anxiety and judgment and criticism and negative thoughts, it gives it a rest. And our psyches need a rest. My God, what we do to ourselves and how much we beat ourselves up. So how can you heal the layers in the psyche? How can you heal emotional dysregulation? What can you do to interrupt this wiring and lay down new neural pathways in the brain? So this is where neuroscience, I think, can be a powerful option for healing, because neurons that fire together wire together. Every time you think a positive thought, you start to lay down the potential of neurons starting to wire together and then begin to fire together. And pretty soon you wake up one day and you go, you know what? I am a good person. I'm okay. You see, we start to shift our sense of self into something much more positive. Life is a zigzag. We're not going to get away from that. That's going to happen. And what Gurdjieff taught us so much of the time, he would say it over and over again, when life gets tough and the ocean is tumbling all around you and the waves are crashing, surf. That's what he would tell us. He would give us the formula: be peaceful, easeful, and useful. So he would collapse the yoga teachings into really beautiful, simple conceptualizations. So we don't want to live like this. We want to start to begin to shift that stress response, the anxiety response, the defensive mechanisms in our psyche. Whoops. And in order to do that, we have to understand another gift that yoga gives us, which are the concept of the gunas. The gunas are just simply qualities. On one end is hyperactivity, sympathetic overdrive, anxiety, rage, activation. The other end is dull, lethargic, parasympathetic extreme, depression, helplessness, those type of qualities. We tend to flip-flop back and forth, but the truth is yoga, which means union, is a balance between these two forces. And that's where we want to move our energy toward, is balance, union, centeredness, sattvic energy, purity, settledness, sort of more inspirational type of energy. So why is negative thinking so hard to revamp? Again, sometimes these patterns serve a purpose. The defense mechanisms protect us from perceived or actual emotional pain in the environment, from emotional abuse, etc. The patterns protect us from vulnerability, and again, some of these are ingrained, learned patterns. Why are bad habits so hard to break? Again, talking about dopamine. It's one of the main chemicals regulating the pleasure center of the brain. It regulates motivation, activates with anticipation, chocolate, sends signals to receptors in the brain saying this feels good. So again, a cookie, coffee, whatever activates that pleasure center of the brain and causes you to want your objective. It's a conditioned response is all that it is. So what about our neurobiology? How do we disrupt the pattern of negativity and break bad habits through our neurobiology? There are 4 chemicals. There's lots of chemicals in the brain, but there are 4 main chemicals around the whole concept of happiness and that influence our happiness. These are, and this, you can remember this by the word dose: dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. Dopamine invokes feelings of happiness and pleasure. Oxytocin is the cuddle hormone around compassion and love. Serotonin regulates mood, sleep, calms anxiety, and relieves depression. And endorphins, it's a natural pain medication hormone, and it helps make us feel better, improves our mood, increases pleasure, and minimizes pain. Now, many situations trigger the release of these chemicals, but instead of being in the passenger seat, there are ways you can intentionally cause them to flow. And that's what's really exciting. So this afternoon in the brain science and yoga workshop, some of the things we were doing, we were intentionally invoking these chemicals in our brain by doing certain poses and postures. As an example, the forward folding poses deal, excuse me. The forward bending poses deal with what is called tamasic depression. So we want to elevate, we want to energize the system, not calm the system down. So we want to do backward bending poses to energize tamasic depression. If you have rajasic depression, we want to calm the system down. Rajasic depression is when someone is feeling agitated, irritable, but they're in a depressed state. So we want to calm the system down. And this is where we do the yoga mudras, the forward bending poses, things like that, where we're activating those chemicals in the brain, which help influence and calm and heal the system. Let's see, where are we? So mindfulness meditation and yoga practices have been shown to activate the prefrontal cortex and cool down the amygdala's firing. The amygdala is what flares when we feel under any kind of threat. The amygdala starts going threat, threat, threat. Someone's walking towards you and you feel intimidated by that person, or you just don't feel confident around that person. So the amygdala is going to start to flare and the prefrontal cortex is going to go half offline in a sense, not literally, but just metaphorically. And all of a sudden we lose any judgment and reasoning, and the amygdala is flaring. It's talking to the hippocampus, which is bringing up memories that say, yes, this person is a threat. The last time I talked to him, that he made me feel stupid, or made some comment that made me feel stupid. So you are under a full threat situation in literally less than 5 seconds. So what do we do? Mindfulness, pause, take a breath, and I'll explain why those things are so important. So the practices of mindfulness have been shown to light up the ventral striatum. That's the reward center in the brain. We can learn to step into the pause, notice the sensation of urge that's there, and that activates the prefrontal cortex. It can come back online, so to speak, and we can start to use judgment and reason and say, oh, maybe that's not so true. Maybe I just was in a weird place and they really didn't intimidate me or say something to me. You see, we have to start to activate the prefrontal cortex and not just let the amygdala flare into taking us places that we don't want to be. So takeaway point number 4, negative patterns are disrupted by awareness and pausing, which activates the buddhi, the prefrontal cortex. And we can get more into a witnessing habit. And that allows, again, the prefrontal cortex engagement. We can take a deep breath, and this is very important. I think all yoga teachers should have a better understanding of brain science because these things correlate so beautifully in understanding how to heal. So when we take a deep breath all the way up to the top of the lungs, what happens is bradykinin, which is a neurotransmitter, gets released. And this signals the parasympathetic nervous system to activate. The parasympathetic nervous system relaxes the system. It brings it down. The sympathetic causes arousal, you see? So a simple act of taking a deep breath, so simple, Deep breath. There you go. Bradykinin signaling parasympathetic activation, and we start to feel more settled. So when we're under threat and bradykinin and the parasympathetic nervous system is activating, guess who's going to win that one? The parasympathetic nervous system is going to win that one. So what also happens is the amygdala relaxes, that place in our brain that protects those defensive patterns that feels like it has to protect ourselves, starts to be disrupted and stops that threat looping that occurs. And that gives us an opportunity to lay down new neural pathways and create new wiring. The hippocampus starts to rewire, and we start to say to ourselves, this experience doesn't have to be threatening. This can be okay. This can be easeful. So again, new neural pathways get laid down with emotional and cognitive resets in terms of this event is not threatening. I can relax. Okay, so yoga and mindfulness, bottom line, breaks the cycle of brain chemistry and wiring that loops continuously into activation of emotional or cognitive threat in the core belief system. So mindfulness and awareness allows us to interrupt automatic, reflexive fight, flight, or freeze reactions that can lead us to anxiety, fear, foreboding, and worry. By bringing mindfulness to our actual experience in the moment, we increase the likelihood of exerting more conscious control over our behaviors and attitudes, and thus disrupt the chemical response and the pre-existing wiring of the brain. Witnessing and accepting unpleasant negative experiences allows us to shift our attention and begin to open up to them. Thus, and this is really important, thus, I should be strong enough shifts to, fear is here, or judgment is present. Very different than I should be strong enough. Judgment is here. Okay. You see, that right there is healing. That right there drops our system down a notch or two. Powerful stuff. So takeaway point number 5, integrate the practice of mindfulness and witnessing into the moment-to-moment flow of your life right now. Just integrate it, start it, be aware. I always tell people the 3 B's. Just remember the 3 B's. Check in, body, breath, brain. Do your check-in, body, breath, brain. And then we can move to the 4th B, which is be love. And we want to do better, not bitter. So if we just we can stay with all the B's for now. Okay, so healing is based on the idea that each moment offers the opportunity to notice our current state, shift our attention, and then rewire key neural pathways. So we're going to have a practice moment. I'm going to give you a very powerful technique to take home with you. Very powerful. It's simple, but it's powerful. So let me take just a second. Is it okay if I take 5 more minutes? Or are we getting really close? 5 minutes? Okay. I have to be mindful because I can talk. Okay, excuse me. Okay, so we'll take just a moment and do this technique. So sitting up straight, relax the body, close your eyes, and just, again, body, breath, brain. Let's sync it up. Let's let the body sink into the chair. Soften our muscles. Be aware of a calm flow of breath, feeling the coolness as you inhale, the warmth as you exhale at the tip of the nose. And the brain is engaged in a quiet, curious involvement of the body and breath. So what we're going to do, and you're going to do it on your own, but I'm going to explain what it is. When you're ready, and you're ready to inhale, you're going to hold the breath inhaled as you quietly in your mind repeat the statement, I am calm and relaxed. Repeat it once, twice, whatever you want, with the breath held inhaled, and then exhale and feel the calmness and quiet settle into the body. So go ahead and do that on your own for about 15 to 20 seconds. Inhaling, hold the breath inhaled. Repeat quietly in the mind, I am calm and relaxed. And go ahead and finish wherever you're at. Don't hurry, just gently finishing up. And very slowly shift your attention back to this room. And when you're ready, quietly open your eyes. Now you might feel like a little fuzzy-brained, and that's just a chemical release of endorphins that you consciously, deliberately, intentionally activated in the brain, which helps us lay down new neural pathways. So now you're started. You don't have to have a road full of potholes. We can have a nice, solid road to finding your ice cream cone and your dessert of peace inside of yourself. This is a powerful, powerful technique, and it's something I think we should consider doing like all the time, all through the day. So, just for today, don't worry. Just for today, feel gratitude. Just for today, be aware of your breath. Just for today, relax your body and mind. We can take small, small steps. Don't do anything big. I'm huge on New Year's resolutions, but I stopped making New Year's resolutions for the whole year. What I do now, I love making New Year's resolutions because it's like fun. It's a challenge, can I hit my mark? So what I do now is I do either week or month resolutions. So at the first of the year, 30-day resolution, and if I want, do the same thing again for another 30 days or change it for the next 30 days. So it's just going to be more successful when we do it that way. So did you know that we actually only use a very small portion of our brains? Well, now you have the opportunity to use a much bigger portion of your brain in just utilizing this whole concept of mindfulness, because it really helps reset the entire system. So takeaway point number 6, proof. The proof formula: pause, relax, open. There's an opportunity for your freedom. So if nothing else, just remember the word proof and practice that during the day. So there's options here. Takeaway point number 7. This is the last slide. When we wake up in the morning, we have to cultivate these things, patiently labor day after day, cultivating compassion, cultivating kindness to ourselves, cultivating what's going to be healing for us. The moment you give up, then, that's not very helpful. So when you wake up, take 5 minutes and shift into prayer or feelings of connectedness before starting your day. Pause, relax, become aware. Don't jump out of bed. Have those sacred moments. Showering. Each time you step into the shower, aware, notice, feel the amazing sounds and sensations. I challenge you tomorrow morning when you wake up, when you step into the shower, do it with mindfulness. You're going to have a whole different experience of healing and shifting from negative thinking, breaking bad habits into something more comforting and loving toward your body, breath, brain. When you're eating, notice the taste. Chewing, when you're swallowing, notice those things. Each time you walk up a flight of stairs, build the habit of aware, notice, feel. Shift to the brain as an object of focus. When you walk out of here this evening, don't just fold up the chair. Don't just walk away. Do it with mindfulness. How does it feel to walk on the carpet versus the floor? Notice these things. When you're waiting, when you find yourself waiting, again, go to the breath, go to aware, notice, feel. And if that's the formula, aware, notice, feel, that'll work, or maybe the proof formula will work. It doesn't matter which, just have something that does work and do it every day, 24/7.